Welcome to a Rice University digital media production. For more information about us, please visit our website at www.rice.edu.
Good evening and welcome to Congregation Emanu-El for this Intrafaith panel about Judaism. My name is Mike Pardee. I'm director of the Boniuk Center, and I'm not going to say much tonight other than to introduce a series of people who are going to get us into our program. I will just tell you that this program tonight about intrafaith dialogue and interfaith relations among Jews is the first of what will become a series that will extend over the next year and possibly beyond, certainly through the Abrahamic religions and hopefully others. Some of you might know the Boniuk Center for its work promoting religious tolerance and interfaith dialogue, but actually, like a lot of things at the Boniuk Center, I think this idea initially came from Dr. Boniuk himself, and so obviously we're taking it and running with it, and I think it's going to produce some interesting discussion. So first, I'm going to introduce Dr. Boniuk to say a few words, and then I think we're going to hear briefly from Rice's president, David Lebron, and then we'll turn the program over to our moderator, Stuart Dow, who will introduce the panel and get us going this evening. Well, the evening will end also with a very nice kosher reception in the, I guess it's called the multi-purpose room over there.
Mike, thank you very much. The Boniuk Center was established at Rice University in 2004, and I knew it before we started, but we have learned that promoting religious tolerance is not an easy task. The prejudice and hatred towards various faiths has been ingrained in our society for centuries and is difficult to eliminate. In recent years, I've learned about the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. I knew nothing about them 2 years ago. And I've learned that this is a small group of Muslims who promote peace, they're nonviolent, and are patriotic towards the country in which they live. Throughout the world, I think they number only 1.5 million people. They adhere to the teachings of a prophet from the latter part of the 19th century, and his name is Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who lived from 1835 till 1908. And because the Quran states that there's only one prophet, all of the other Muslim sects, and I've been told that there's 72 others, do not accept this group of Muslims. And this was difficult for me to believe. And I thought about this a lot, and I realized that if we cannot be tolerant of others in our own faith, how can we be tolerant of people in other faiths? And this led to my recommendation to start these series of discussions on interfaith conflicts within various religions. And I thought it would be most appropriate to start with Judaism, and hope that the other symposium that Mike mentioned will follow. And I just want to point out the purpose of these symposia is educational and hopefully will help us achieve our goals. Now, before I introduce David Lebron, I do want to thank Michael Pardee, our executive director, B.J. Smith, Claire Villarreal, and any others who helped in organizing this symposium. I'd now like to call David Lebron, the president of Rice University, to say a few words. David came here, I think, shortly after the Boniuk Center was formed, and he has been very supportive. He's done a lot for Rice, and I appreciate him taking the time to come here and address this group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milton. I want to really begin by thanking Milton and Laurie Boniuk for their for their vision. When I first learned of the Boniuk Center, I quickly came to the conclusion it was really hard to imagine a more important endeavor than the one that they created at Rice. I suppose a number of decades ago we thought, in some sense, we were overcoming the problem of religious tolerance and religious hatred. But I think as we've seen over the past couple of decades, that problem is with us more than ever. And I want to thank Milton and Laurie for really drawing Rice University into that effort. It's the Boniuk Center for the Study and Advancement of Religious Tolerance. And we try to do both of those things. I think bring what academic institution has to offer. But unlike other things, perhaps, that an academic institution does, it's hard to be on both sides of this issue. That is, hard to be for tolerance and against tolerance. And so we have to be clear about where we stand on that. Rice was founded or officially launched 99 years and 7 months ago. That's a way of subtly saying, don't forget to think about the centennial of Rice University in October. It was started in a very affirmative and strong way as a purely secular institution. That said, we have one of the most diverse religious communities, as well as other forms of diversity among our student body, as our Kinder Institute for Urban Research declared, the most diverse city in the United States, including its religious diversity. So there's really, in some sense, no better place, we think, at Rice, and no better city than Houston to think about the problems of religious tolerance, although it is a global problem, obviously. But having here in Houston the different religious communities to participate in that conversation, and Houston is a very rich religious community for virtually all religions. It gives us incredible opportunity, even just at Rice, where we don't have a chaplain, unlike many universities. We don't have a religiously denominated chapel, but we are surrounded by churches and a synagogue with vibrant religious groups from really every religious community on campus. And so that's an issue we have to think about daily to some extent, but we hope more importantly to be able to contribute to these larger issues in society, across the nation, and across the world. So I want to thank all of you again for joining us this evening. Thank Milton and Laurie again for this incredible gift, not just to Rice, but to the city of Houston and the nation. And I look forward to this conversation, another sort of result of Milton's vision, recognizing that too often the problem of religious tolerance is actually not between very different religions, but between people who are close in religion, but find their differences something to argue or even hate other people about. So thank you.
Thank you, President Lebron. My name is Stuart Dow. I am head of the Emery Weiner School, one of the institutions, in addition to Rice, that is lucky enough to benefit from the generosity of the Boniuks. They've been great friends to the Jewish community, the Houston community, but also to the Emery Weiner community specifically. So thank you to them for what they've done for those of us over doing a 6 through 12 education on Stell Link. Dr. Boniuk asked me if I would moderate this, so I don't get to make any declarations. All I get to do is ask questions, which is hard for me, but I think I can do it. We have a fabulous, talented, and diverse panel of leaders, really, both rabbinic clergy leaders on my right and lay leaders on my left. I'll introduce them in just a second. It occurred to me as President Lebron was talking that what Freud called the narcissism of small differences is what we're exploring here. That is to say, you can take a group who share 90%, 95% of what they believe in, but what they can then argue about is the remaining 5%. Or 1%, and boy, can they argue about it, right? And depending on the group, sometimes it can get violent. Thank God, in Jewish tradition, it has tended not to get violent, although there are exceptions to that as well, as we all know. For the most part, though, it's just loud argument that defines Jewish differences. But there are Jewish differences, and what we decided to do, Rabbi Walter and I discussed sort of different approaches along with Mike Pardee and Milton, and we decided what would be interesting, instead of my just asking generic questions, we formulated hypotheticals, right? The idea was to make it as real as possible. So we have framed 6 hypotheticals that I will read to you. The panel has already seen them, so there's no sort of hidden surprise here. I might surprise them at the end, depending on time. But right now, I will confess to you that each of the gentlemen behind me has had an opportunity to read the hypotheticals, consider their response, and obviously that's what they'll then present to you. I have no idea how we'll do on time. I'll keep an eye on my watch. I'll keep an eye on you. We'll get a sense of how this is working. And hopefully, of course, we'll have a chance for Q&A as well. We understand that interplay will be interesting. So first, in terms of if you don't already know, let me introduce you. You have Rabbi Radinsky, who is formerly of United Orthodox, still is Rabbi Emeritus at United Orthodox Synagogues. Rabbi Roy Walter, who of course presided here on this bima for many, many years from Emanu-El, representing the Reform movement, I suppose. I feel like there should be some like PA speaker like number 22, but there's not that. In any event, Rabbi Jack Segal, who was the rabbi when I was bar mitzvah at Beth Yeshurun, representing the conservative movement. On my far left is Isaac Boniuk, who is Milton's brother, also an ophthalmologist. We'll talk about his perspective on these answers from a lay leadership or a lay Jew perspective. And immediately on my left is Jan Digilov, a former student of mine, graduated in the 3rd class of Emery Weiner and recently graduated from Rice University. Phenomenal young man who I think will add to the discussion. I told him his job is to provoke. In any event, so with that said, let's dive right in. Here is the first hypothetical, and then I guess we'll start, Rabbi Radinsky, with you, and then I'll find some way to mix it up so that everyone gets, we'll sort of change the order. Hypothetical number 1, Jerry Grossman, age 40, is a committed Jew. He's learned, relatively observant, and very active in the community. He is also gay, something he realized when he was in middle school. After spending the past 15 years in a monogamous relationship with his partner, Michael Schwartz, also 40, the two formalized their relationship in a civil union recognized by the state of California. However, what Jerry and Michael really want is for their relationship to be recognized by their faith. They want to be married in a synagogue under a chuppah. What is your response and why? Rabbi Radinsky.
Is this on? Yep. Oh, it's on. It's good. First of all, as you all know, people can do whatever they want and belong to any synagogue they want, basically. Almost no Jewish groups look at what a person's private life is. And I know that our congregation, you're supposed to keep Shabbos and keep kosher and do other things, not commit adultery either. And I know quite a few of our members that have done one of those 3. So, you know, it's the fact that a person doesn't keep all the religious norms is up to him. I know for many years there used to be called, most of the Jews in America called themselves Orthodox until World War II. Even in Houston, most of the synagogues were Orthodox. There was a small conservative synagogue called Beth at the time. Dr. Yeshurun was Beth Yeshurun Orthodox, big Orthodox shul. And there was a smaller Reform shul where all the rich Jews lived. You know, that's Beth Israel. And and Jews chose to do whatever they wanted to do. And after the Second World War, basically, they felt that they needed to, many of them, to join either Reform or Conservative. And although Conservative didn't exist until 1948, when actually Adat Yeshurun became conservative. In fact, there's a story that Beth split up. The Beth went to Beth Yeshurun and the El went to Emanu-El. And that's what really happened. And the worst religious fight that ever happened in this city was between people in Beth Israel, when they were anti-Zionists and Zionists, and when Rabbi Khan came back from the army and finally didn't have a job because he was a Zionist, that's how Emanu-El was formed. And I know, and people can back me up on this, that brothers never talked to each other after that. And they went to the banks and says, don't give my brother money. Because they were so insistent on their people not recognizing Israel. But this is past history, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is people can do what they want, but they can't ask the religion to sanctify something which a religion doesn't believe in. Now, I'm all in favor of civil unions. The government shouldn't stand in religious business. And I think marriage is really a religious term. I mean, you can change it any way you want. But I voted for give health care and hospital visitation rights and all that. I'm not in favor of religion having to be forced to give their approval to something they don't approve. And now, of course, there's many reasons why the religion doesn't approve it. And of course, we know that there's actually a biblical injunction against it. You can say it only refers to sacred prostitution between men and not other gay things. But the way it's been interpreted throughout the generations, I'm sure there have been a lot of gay Jews. In fact, I know there were several on my board. Nobody cared what they did. And I don't think that anybody cares now what a person does. But you can't impose your values on the value of a congregation. Of course, what I always used to, when they first started the first gay congregation here in Houston, I said, what are you doing that for? Are you going to have an adulterous congregation now? And you're going to have another thing congregation? And I mean, what did you have to do for? You can stay wherever you are. So, and of course, we know there's a history because, especially even the Indian tribes in America, they would kill gay people. They make them dress like women and all that stuff. Most civilizations, except for the Greeks and the Romans, thought that gay people would undermine their society. Not Sparta, because in Sparta, every man had a lover. They thought they felt that and poor women, they only went to a wife once a year because they felt they'd be better fighters. They're fighting for their lover who was standing right next to them. But I think that a person can do what he wants, but you can't ask the religion to do something that it's incapable of doing without destroying itself. Now, of course, some people can try to figure out different ways of making it holy for this union to be blessed. Well, they can bless it themselves. And of course, I don't know if the Reform movement has already devised a ceremony or not, but it just doesn't sit well with tradition. A marriage is meant to have children. It's meant to not only for that, but for other emotional needs and other needs. But it's not something we call marriage. You can call it anything you want, but it wouldn't be considered kedushin. In Hebrew, the word kedushin means holiness.
Forgive me, Rabbi, just so that we can get through. Is that all right? Can I interrupt?
I was finishing.
Thank you very much. Roy?
I grew up in an Orthodox congregation in Memphis, Tennessee, and an issue like this was never even an issue when I was growing up. No one ever even thought about it. First of all, gays, were in a closet and hidden in the world. And so, in a sense, I think we would all agree that this question is one that really arises out of the modern cultural civilization of America and maybe Western Europe too, but certainly it's not a question that would even be an issue in the Middle East and in many other countries. Reform Judaism leaves it up to each rabbi to make the decision for himself or herself as to whether he or she is willing to perform a ceremony for a gay couple. There are some rabbis, myself among them, who will perform a ceremony for a gay couple provided both the partners are Jewish. I don't perform interfaith marriages between men and women, and I don't perform them between people of the same gender. However, I not only will, but have performed such a ceremony. I did not call it kiddushin, which is the word that Rabbi Radinsky referred to. I did not refer to even the English word marriage in the ceremony because unless you're trying to be a civil disobedient, the fact is in the state of Texas, it's not a marriage. Now, I realize in the question that was asked, it's legal in that state, and they've had a civil ceremony, and what they would really like is a religious ceremony in their synagogue under a chuppah, which I would perform, provided, of course, that they're both Jewish and are establishing a Jewish home. But I don't know about other rabbis. I made a requirement of the couple for whom I provided the ceremony. One of the things that makes a marriage is that there is something legal binding you together. It's a contract, both in Jewish law and in American law. And so I insisted that the couple create some kind of contract. It's a civil contract between them in which everything that I own you, everything that you own, I own. There's a actual formula for that. I don't know what it's called. There's a certain kind of contract. And I did that because I wanted, if they were going to go through this ceremony, and it was going to have meaning beyond simply I say I do and you say I do, that it had to have some kind of bond, that you couldn't just get angry one day, pick up your CDs and walk out the door and say, these are mine, those are yours, goodbye. There had to be something legal that held you together. And so I made that requirement, and they fulfilled it, and they're still together. So yes, I would perform the ceremony. I did not use, most of my colleagues that I know of take what I would call a traditional marriage ceremony as performed by Reform rabbis and use it for gay couples. I did not do that. I created something separate. We didn't do the traditional 7 blessings. We wrote new 7 blessings. We did not say Hare Ad Mekudesh Leir at all. I created a separate ceremony because I wanted to be sure that it was not to be misunderstood as Kiddushin, because that is not what the tradition represents.
My answer to this question is the following. I want to tell you a brief story that happened about 30 years ago. I had a call one day, a former student of mine who was at that time a college graduate, just graduated from college, said she wanted to meet with me with 2 other people. I said, fine, come in the afternoon. She came in with 2 other people. She said, do you know that we have a homosexual synagogue in Houston right now? I said, no, I did not know about this at all. This was way back, 30 years ago, not the year 2012. He says, what we want is just one thing, and that is we want you, Rabbi Segal, all of us, we're all going to come to Beth Yeshurun on Friday night, and we want you to get up and say, Rabbi Segal, you're going to say that we at Beth Yeshurun welcome the homosexual congregation of Houston to Beth Yeshurun here. I said, it's a nice statement, but I cannot say that because next week I'll have to say, would you please raise your hand if you're a heterosexual? I mean, we don't divide the people into what they do in bed at night or in the afternoon or in the morning over here. We just don't do that. Well, last week you invited and said hello to the Hadassah group over here. Yes, but I didn't ask them if they were homosexuals or heterosexuals over here. And I remember I had a call from the young woman, I should say, the next week. She says, Rabbi Segal, you were my favorite teacher and rabbi 2 weeks ago. Today, I literally hate you, and I despise you. I will never forget. Now she's my best friend, but this is besides the point. But 30 years have gone by since then. In regard to this question that has been posed over here, the answer is very simple. That person who says they want to be married in a synagogue under a chuppah, as Rabbi Walters just said, there are loads of rabbis in the United States right now who do perform those weddings under a chuppah in the manner that the 2 men or 2 women, whatever it was, want to have it done. Why don't they simply choose a rabbi who is going to do that? Why merely create a problem? They know, for example, I don't do it. No, but I want you to do it, Rabbi Segal. You are my teacher. I want you to do it. I remember once I went for dinner at someone's home, and I eat kosher, but they were serving non-kosher meat. So I ate the vegetables. I still remember there was broccoli. I love broccoli. And they had broccoli, and I was eating the broccoli there. And the woman said, Rabbi Segal, there's a lot of meat over here for you over here. Why don't you eat it? I know you're not a vegetarian here. I said, thank you very much. I didn't tell her I did eat it. I didn't eat it. I just let it go by. That's just by. And she cut off the meat and put it on my plate for me over here. And then somebody came back the next day and she said that she was so angry that you did not eat the meat that she purposely prepared for that evening. Now, why do they want me, force me, and coerce me, and pressure me to do something which I don't do, for example? Now, I know she prepared the meat. There's no two ways about it. But I was not being insulting to that individual. I just don't eat non-kosher meat. It's as simple as that. I love broccoli. I ate the broccoli there, and that's just about all. Same thing over here. These two people, Jerry Grossman and his fiancée, or whatever the correct terminology happens to be, they know that there are many, many rabbis. Here, just call Rabbi Walter, and I'm sure that in California, no, you can't, as he stated, you cannot do it here in the state of Texas. I don't want him ending up in the Huskow here in town. But you could probably tell these people the name of somebody in California. And all they would do is they wouldn't even have to, for example, go searching for a rabbi. The rabbi in California would say, we'll meet next Tuesday, and we'll be able to settle this matter totally, completely, and absolutely. So all I could say is, to me, this is not a problem over here. If you want to stand under the chuppah with someone, get a chuppah, get a rabbi, and you can do it over there. But just don't finger a particular rabbi that you want to have it done with because you want that rabbi. Each person has to look in the mirror in the morning and make a decision for himself or herself. That person wants to get married in that way, may God's blessings be upon them. As for me, I have to shave also. I shave every day. And I have to look in the mirror also, and I have to live with myself too.
Thank you, Rabbi Segal. Now go to the non-clergy on my left. Jan?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question because it brings up one of the conflicts that people of my generation certainly run into when they try to understand the way that they fit in to a very traditional religion with long-standing set boundaries. 30 years ago, and it's very unfortunate, but there were people who had to live their entire lives with a secret, and they had to prevent others from knowing who they truly were. And thank God, I think now, people of my generation have shed that history, or they're on their way to shedding that history. And I think that homosexuality is something that is becoming more open. It's something that certainly people of my age are okay with. They embrace, and they realize that, well, there's a human being. That's how they feel about the subject, and they can't change it about themselves. I think that a lot of the times there's this question of, oh, is it a choice? Is there a, is it nature, nurture, whatever? I don't know why I choose women, or I don't think that it's a choice. And I think that for somebody else, it's as much a choice as it is for me. Now, the question is, if we say that we accept these people as human beings, and we agree that all men and women are created equally in the image of God, then those people are, of course, entitled to the same rights that we are. That's coming at it from, I recognize, an American and secular perspective. So now we have to say to ourselves, well, how do we put together our secular lives and our religious lives? And that's, of course, a question that we all struggle with, every Reformed, conservative, and Orthodox. And it's one that, for a generation that I'm part of, that question in particular is opening up a can of worms. Because I think the case can be made that, okay, so we marry two men who, it's great that in the story they're both Jewish, but then they have kids. And how do we know if their kids are Jewish if they don't have a mother who can be identified as the, as the maternal influence who defines the Judaism of those children? Fundamentally, it's a question that no matter how you answer it, you have to make wide, broad decisions and statements about the religion as a whole. You can't just pick this one topic and say, well, we'll allow it here or there. There's a real conflict, and I think it's something that people recognize. And I would suspect, I don't know, I would suspect that every generation runs into new modern ideas that question the fundamentals of religion. And I would suggest, and the rabbis know better than I do, that religions do change, and they do make progress, and they reinterpret laws. I think if we look a lot of the Talmud, we see that gender roles are the first to be pointed to, that we can say, well, of course there's been a major shift in the way that we look at women 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and than we do right now. And in that sense, I think that homosexuality is no different, and that generations will come to terms with the fact that the religion will change because our society as a whole has changed. It's funny. I'm from Russia. My parents, are from the Soviet Union, and they're wonderful people. But in that society, homosexuality was a terrible crime, and everybody knew that, and everybody was terrified. And there's still real, there's remnants of that idea and culture in Russian society that aren't going away as quickly. But in the rest of the world, we are coming to terms with the fact that everybody is created equal, and that nobody wants to label themselves as an outsider. Nobody wants to live a life of secrecy. Nobody wants to be hated, and nobody wants to be unaccepted by a religion or by any part of society. So for all of my friends that are homosexuals, just like I say, well, they should be entitled to any right that our country bestows upon all of us, I think that they, of course, should be allowed to find their place within their religion, and they do. And frankly, it's up to the more traditional aspects of our religion to determine the speed at which they change on their own, because it seems to me that secular society and just the global community is making its choice, and I don't think that progress is going to be reversed. I think that people will become more and more accepting of homosexuality within our civilization.
I don't want to repeat anything that anybody has said, but I would say this. I appreciate what Rabbi Walter did in terms of creating a ceremony that he felt was different than the typical marriage ceremony, that had features that were similar perhaps, but were created specifically for the situation at hand. And I agree that people do what they want to do, but we cannot ask rabbis to do things that are not part of what they will practice or what they believe. An interesting situation occurred a number of years ago in St. Louis. My wife is a graphic artist, and she does ketubot, mostly for family members. It's about 2 months of work creating the ketubah. And she has a friend who's gay, and he was getting married to a non-Jewish man, and he wanted to do it with a ketubah and with some sort of Jewish ceremony. And the ceremony was performed by a Reform rabbi, but not in the synagogue. I think in the garden or in the rabbi's office with a very small group present. It was interesting. She did a beautiful job on the ketubah. A few years went by. Unfortunately, this relationship did not persist, and he then wanted her to modify the ketubah so that his former mate was taken out of the artistic rendition. She never did that, and I don't know whatever happened to the ketubah. The other thing I would say is this. Sometimes people say, well, look, if you don't do all of the 613 mitzvot, and you don't do everything that Judaism espouses, then why do anything? I personally don't believe that that's correct. I think that you do as much as you can. You learn more about your religion, and you try to continually do more. And I think most of us see it as we're striving to walk up the rungs of a ladder to get to a higher place. We don't all achieve everything, We can't do it all, and we choose to do, and we should try to keep striving to do more. So I think what the rabbis have said and what perhaps we've contributed is that this is a reality of the generation that we live in. I think a lot of people, we all have friends who are gay, or we know people who are gay. Many of them are very serious and very sensitive individuals, and I would agree that they can't exist inside a closet. They have to be out in the world where we all live, and sometimes, by some means, accommodations have to be made to satisfy their needs. And I think some of the things that have done just that.
Before going to the next hypothetical, we're never going to get through all the hypotheticals, by the way. At some point, I would sort of just ask you which will poll the audience, which of the remaining ones do you want to hear. For those who are interested in that issue, by the way, there's a fascinating essay written by a guy named Steve Greenberg, who is a modern Orthodox rabbi who is gay, who came out of the closet and talked about both his commitment to living a life according to Jewish law, halakha, and living a life according to his sexual orientation, which is being gay. He wrote an article called Gayness and God. His name is Steve Greenberg. He's a fascinating guy, and I commend the essay to you, Gayness and God. You can Google it, and it'll come up. Okay, as long as we're talking about those who, for whatever reason, are not necessarily sort of provided full and equal position under halakha, which is in effect by saying we're not going to offer kiddushin, we're not going to sort of use kiddushin in terms of that union. It clearly is of a different level, so I'll stick with that sort of sense of segregation and read the following to you. And we'll start this time with Dr. Boniuk. Rebecca and Benjamin are 12-year-old twins who have attended Jewish day schools their entire life. Both speak Hebrew fluently, and both daven, meaning they pray, beautifully. At their upcoming B'nai Mitzvah, the two are scheduled to lead the entire service and to read from the Torah. However, this plan does not sit well with their grandfather, Zadie Harry, who says that women cannot and should not chant Torah or lead tefillah, prayer, in front of a congregation. He loves both his grandchildren and is proud of their accomplishments, but says he simply will not attend if they allow Rebecca to chant Torah or lead tefillah. Your response?
I belong to a synagogue called a Traditional Congregation of Creve Courts in St. Louis County, and we have some unusual characteristics in our synagogue. We require an Orthodox, a rabbi with Orthodox smicha or confirmation, ordination. We have separate seating and mixed seating, both. We do not have a cantor per se. Various people do parts of the service. And we have tried over the years to do things that allow women to have a more active role in the services within the confines of halakha or interpretation. We've done some things like on Friday night, the Kabbalat Shabbat program, the services leading up to Shabbat have been interpreted by many to be able to be done by a woman. We've done some programs where the bat mitzvah girl will do a special program, and Milton and Lori came up when my daughter, who's now 39, had a bat mitzvah ceremony. She took a couple of topics like family and friends, had special readings. She read from Ketuvim, which are part of the writings, not part of the regular service. The regular service was carried on. This was a separate part that was intertwined in the service, but things were done that were not generally required. At our synagogue, we have women who read the Megillot or participate in the reading of the Megillot. For example, on Purim, Shir HaShirim, and the other times that the Megillot are read. And most recently, we started a program with the approval of the rabbi, and after he conferred with his colleagues, and we now allow on a special occasions or not every week, but on a maybe once a month basis, where a woman or a bat mitzvah candidate can do a haftorah, but the blessings both before and after the haftorah are done by a male member of the congregation. Now, some of those things could be done to assuage the feelings of the grandfather, but in all sincerity, there's a principle in Judaism that shalom bayit, the peace in the home, should be sustained. And I think there are times when, for the general welfare of the family and the community, both locally and beyond, accommodations have to be made. And my feeling would be that the grandfather should attend. If some of these modifications could be done that might make him feel better about what's going on, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, I remember the development of my personal Jewish identity. There was a very impactful experience when, with my class at Emery Weiner, we went to the Chabad headquarters in New York, and everybody was quite nice. It was a lot of fun, and it took about half an hour for us to realize that there wasn't a single female that we had seen in the entire afternoon. You know, where were the women? Is kind of what we were thinking. You know, from then on, I've looked to gender roles in my own personal tradition quite a bit, and it's one of the areas where I think we see the most that progress does happen within our religion, that change does occur. When you read the way that even the writers of the Talmud viewed their wives and daughters, and of course I would ask the rabbis about this, but in my opinion, I think it's perfectly clear that it was written by men who had a very clear viewpoint about women, and it wasn't always particularly positive. That has changed as part of our society, and our religion has changed, I think, with it. It's taken quite some time for us to recognize that, but we also have to remember that the female liberation movement itself is still fairly new. I do look at that issue in particular and say, of course, one's daughter and one's son have the same exact rights within a synagogue, and they should, you know, in our society today in America, there's no way to tell your daughter that she's separate but equal. And a lot of the times we hear that, you know, I get kind of upset when I hear somebody say, oh, the women, they don't have to follow the mitzvot, not because they're less holy, but because they're more holy, in fact, because they're not obligated. And I think that's awkward. I think it's strange. And you know, I haven't been around for the, you know, whole course of Jewish history, but I think it's revisionist in some way, because it is clear to me what you know, you don't have to be brilliant to know what the men who wrote the Talmud thought of the women. So, yeah.
Rabbi Segal?
I think you have to realize that here you do not have a religious problem. You have a psychological problem. You have an elderly man who is saying, it's either my way or the highway. There's no two ways about it. I'm going to tell you what to do. Oh, you tell me the kids have already been studying for 12 months, the Haftorah, the entire Torah reading, not even as we do it at Beth Yeshurun, you know, only 1/3 of the Torah reading, but they've done the entire Torah reading. You're going to do it my way, otherwise I'm not going to come. I would ask the grandfather to come in and meet with me in the office. What I would do with him, I would say to him, you're absolutely right. When you were bar mitzvah, you should have had it exactly the way you want it and the way your father wanted it then. No two ways about it. But now, unfortunately, look at these kids. These kids have studied all the time. You want to lose them? You will lose them. I'm telling you right now. They will say, my Zaidi is from the 14th century, and I have nothing to do with him. He's not my Zaidi anymore. He's an old man. You don't want that. And I would tell them an old story. I like this story. And by coincidence, I found these little sticks in my pocket. There's a story of Sam Katz, who came to the United States. about just slightly after World War I. So it must have been about 1919 or 20. He was a youngster, maybe 8 years of age. Came with 3 of his younger sisters, his father and his mother. Unfortunately, his father died because of an ailment that he had, and he died about 1920. So his mother said to him, you know, you're going to have to stop going to school because you have to help us support the children. They lived on the east side. And he did that. He says, what am I going to do? She says, here, I'll buy 3 pairs of pants for you. Go from house to house and see if you could sell these pants. And he sold them. He said, look, I made $1 profit today. Give me 6 of them. Tomorrow I'll make $2 profit. And he sold all 6 of them. Then he said, I'm a strong kid. Give me not only 6 pairs of pants, give me some shirts also. And now he's making $3, $4 profit every single day. He was getting wealthy. So then he said to his mother, Mom, I can't carry anymore. Give me a push cart. And what I'll do is I'll push it through the east side. He was making money galore, this kid. Then he said, Mom, the push cart is not big enough. Get me a horse and buggy. And he had a horse and buggy. And he was getting a little older. He was a teenager already. And then he said, I'm going to open up a store. And eventually, as the years went by and by, he had 72 stores throughout the United States, department stores, Katz's, and he had 4 sons himself. And eventually what took place, when he was about 80 years of age, he told the secretary, he said, Jane, I'm dying. There's no 2 ways about it. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be gone. I want you to call my 4 sons and tell them to come here because I fear something bad is going to happen over here with my 4 sons. She said, what? But he said to her, I want you to do the following. Tell each one of my sons to bring 2 twigs. When they come, each one should bring 2 twigs along. Well, the 4 boys heard about this, so what they did is they said, Dad must be suffering from dementia or maybe Alzheimer's disease already. 2 twigs. I mean, he's a multi-millionaire, and he tells us to bring 2 twigs along. But the younger son said, don't argue with him. There's a great inheritance over here. I don't want him to get excited when he's lying on his deathbed. So all 4 sons came, and what happened was the old man, he just got himself up in the bed, and he said to his oldest son, he said, Abe, I want you to do the following. Take one of the twigs that you have, and I want you to break it. And he looks at the other 3, and the other 3 say, do it. Don't be a fool. This is not the time to argue with Dad. And Dad was breathing. It was labored breathing. It was terrible. So he goes like this, and he breaks it. Benjamin, I want you to do it. Exact same thing. He breaks it also. He says to the 3rd one, Chatzkel, and to David, he says the same thing. Then he says, David, the youngest, he said, you are my weightlifter over here. You look just like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. I want you to take the remaining 4 twigs and put it in your hand, and I want you to break them. He says, okay, Dad. So he puts the 4 twigs in his hand. Hey, Dad, I can't break it. I'll break them one at a time for you. He said, no. Break all 4 together over here. He says, I can't do it, Dad. When they're together, you can't break it. When they're individuals, you can break them. He said, boys, I want you to learn this, he said, because I'm not going to last too much longer. If the 4 of you, after I die, will learn to be united, nobody will break you. None of your competitors will break you. But if you're going to fight with yourselves over here, they're going to break you, and there's no 2 ways about it. Same thing over here, I would tell the old man, do you want to create an explosion within your home right now, that your daughter will have a fight with a husband, and the kids will fight with the father and the mother? Do you want there to be an atomic reaction within your home over here? I'll tell you what, just come and be a spectator. We will not give you an aliyah. You will get no honors over here, so you won't have to violate your religious principles. Make believe you're going to the Yankee Stadium and you're watching a ball game. That's just about all. The boy, it's not a bar mitzvah for you. You don't have to do anything. Just sit there, and that's just about all. Your daughter and your son-in-law will love you. The kids will kiss you. No 2 ways about it. And you won't be violating your own principles over here. This is what I would tell them. It's a psychological question that requires a psychological answer, and that's just about all. And you can have some more of these, have some more twigs.
Anybody want a twig? This is where you need a Solomon. to try and bridge a gap between people. I think Rabbi Segal is absolutely correct. It's not that there aren't religious issues for this elderly gentleman. Of course there are, but this is a very delicate matter. I don't think you can. I think the goal here is to bring people to some kind of understanding, even if the synagogue has to make some kind of accommodations. There are, for example, it was not in regard to a bar or a bat mitzvah, but there are a couple of instances where I have helped people create a separate ceremony where they did what would be traditional here, let's say, so that the child would have done the full bat mitzvah, but that they also did another ceremony so grandpa could be there and one that would fit what he was able to do. My short answer really is that you have to figure out a way to make it possible for the grandfather to participate in the concept of the bat mitzvah, even if he doesn't participate. And by participate, I don't mean sit on the bima and pass the Torah and all that, because that's not going to happen, even just sitting in the shul. So everybody has to be willing to make a certain amount of compromise. And one of the things that I find is if the rabbi and the congregation are willing to make certain kinds of accommodations, then it's easier to get the family members to do the same.
This is a very difficult problem, and I sympathize with both sides. There are other solutions, even in an Orthodox way. We have women's services. So in a bar mitzvah, the men will sit on one side of the mechitza, and the women will come on the other, and they'll do everything. And the men will just sit there. Of course, doesn't mean they can't participate too, but they're not leading the service anyway. There are ways that this thing could be worked out so that everybody would be satisfied. However, this comes to another problem, which I think we have to discuss. And that is, how far do you have to go to violate your religious principles to satisfy your children? And I think that your children have no right to impose their religious principles on you, just like you have no right to impose your principles on them. And I'm referring to weddings. This happens a lot. A girl and a boy, you know, marriage really is a product of two things: your cultural similarity and emotional opposites. And there's some very beautiful, wonderful Gentiles who are as well educated as Jews, and you fall in love with them. They're very good. They're very nice people. And they want to get married. Now, the parents say, if you get married, we won't come to your wedding. And I always tell the parents, don't go to the wedding. Afterwards, you can have over to the house. I'm saying don't break with them, but they want to have get married in a church, and you don't want to go to the church. Why should you have to go to the church? Afterwards, I tell them, because the halacha is actually this way. The Jewish law says you push aside with the left hand, but you ring close with the right hand. That applies to everything. You never reject your children 100%. That was a big mistake Abraham made. Abraham rejected. He had 8 children. You know, he had 8 children. And 7 of them, as soon as they did something bad, he just rejected them. So the only one you hear about is Yitzchak, but he had 6 children. He had Ishmael, he had 8 children, and they had another 6 with Keturah after Sarah died. And then Isaac did the exact opposite. What did Yitzchak do? See no evil, hear no evil, do no evil. He never rebuked Esau for what he was doing. Jacob was the only one who was able to maintain his children, because he rebuked them when he thought they did something wrong, but he always brought them close. He didn't kick them out like Abraham did. So it's a very difficult problem. So that, especially when it comes to wedding, your kid's going to get married in a church, I wouldn't go. And I tell them, don't go. But you can invite them to your house afterwards for dinner. You don't break the bond completely. But why should they impose my religious principles, their religious principles on me? And I think that in a certain sense, this is a case here, although I don't know all the details. And sometimes the grandfather, like you said, psychological, he's not very religious at all. He just wants to control the family. And that happens many times, you know. And that he really isn't sincere in his objection. But there's ways that you can get around it. And as Rabbi Walter said, I know that because some of these people come to talk, Rabbi Walter is very good at this. They says in America for a while, your congregation didn't allow you to say all the Haftorah, and didn't allow you to do this prayer. Rabbi Walter, you can wear a yarmulke now, you can wear a tallis now. I remember you couldn't do that. So, the people came to him, and Rabbi said, okay, we'll have a little service in the Frohler Chapel, and then afterwards we'll have the other service here. And everyone's happy, 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 happy. So Rabbi Walter knows how to do all these things. And I applaud him for his not only his great judgmental qualities, but the fact that he's a courageous man. I remember when the board here told me, because you didn't tell me, but some of your members told me, that the only way they could read the Haftorah and chant it is if the organ was playing. That's what they told me. I don't know if it's really true, but that's what they told me years ago anyway. So anyway, all I have to say is this is a very complicated, and my advice would depend upon the situation and upon the people. There are certain times when there's such a rivalry between the son and the daughter and the parents that they want to stick it to the parents, and the other time it's the opposite. So we have to do like we say, Jewish law is case law. And I wrote a little thing before I actually came here to tell you that Jewish law is always discerned by case. And you go according to the rabbi who you think is the most learned. We have a rabbi in our generation called Ovadia Yosef who's done such great things to bring the Judaism into the modern world. He even gave a statement now that women can read the Megillah for men, and children, and teach your girls to be chazanit. That's what he said. I don't know if it means for men too, but for reading Megillah, he said that. Anyway, I'll stop here.
Incidentally, in case you're wondering, it's true that we take the 11th graders at Emery Weiner to New York and they visit Chabad. But in the name of being vigorously pluralistic, our 10th graders go to California and they go to a gay and lesbian synagogue. So you see, we're covering all the ends here. That's true. Which one first? The 10th graders go first. That's just the way it works. And that way we anger everyone. That's our job. All right, let's dive into medical ethics, or at least an issue related to medical ethics, I suppose. And I'll mix it up a little bit. We'll start, by the way, and I apologize, I'm going to have to be tough on you, rabbis, just be in the interest of time. So if I sort of knock or make some wild gesture, it's not because I disagree, it's because I just want you to see if you can wind up a little bit so we can get to one more before we take some from the audience. Here we go. Susan is a 22-year-old single Jewish woman. Last Thursday, she learned that she was pregnant. Susan certainly knows who the father is, but she is not at all convinced that he's the one. In other words, the two don't have plans to marry. In fact, and more importantly for this question, Susan does not want to have the baby. She is currently a senior at the University of Texas, majoring in biology, and she's planning to apply to medical school so that one day she can follow her father's footsteps and work in cancer research at MD Anderson. Being a single mother will make that dream very difficult, if not impossible. She intends to have an abortion as quickly as possible. What would your counsel be? I'll start with you, Rabbi Walter, and then we'll jump to Rabbi Radinsky and then Rabbi Segal.
I think we all have to begin with the fact that we all agree that human life is sacred. There is precedence in Jewish law for performing abortion, and I think that that should be the guide as to how the rabbi leads this young woman forward. Details aside for the moment, because that would be a very lengthy discussion. I would, of course, do everything in my power, frankly, to convince this woman not to abort that child. It doesn't mean I don't think that abortion is sometimes the right decision. I certainly do not want to destroy her life, but if there is any way that she can carry that child to term and give it up for adoption, rather than terminate that child without destroying her life, I would urge her to search every avenue possible to have that child, and figure out a way to do it without damaging whatever the career, whatever the issues are. If that could not be done, then that's a different issue. But one of the things I think is true is that there are often more options available to people to carry a baby to term than they realize. And my goal would be to explore every single one of those with this woman and do everything in my power to encourage her not to give up that child.
Rabbi Radinsky?
Well, Rabbi Walter and I are in an agreement, basically. Of course, this assumes that the woman would even listen to you. Most people, when they come to the rabbi, want you to confirm their opinions. They don't want you to give them something that they haven't already made up their mind that they're going to do. In fact, I've had many people storm out of my office furious, especially because I wouldn't agree with them on the way they were treating their parents or the way other issues were coming up. So that in many instances, they come to you already, their mind's made up. They just want you to validate their decision. And that's something that's very difficult to do, and without knowing all the details. We don't know about this woman, what her emotional state is. Judaism allows abortion if it would affect the mother's health, and especially her mental health. That's why some of the rabbis say they want to stay out of the abortion fight, because if they ban abortion, many times they're going to violate Jewish law, which requires an abortion if the baby is threatening the mother's life. The mother's life comes first. And that's always been the Jewish law. In fact, some rabbis say, don't go to a Catholic hospital if you're having a baby, because you may not be, I don't know if it's still true, but they choose the baby over the mother, and we do the opposite. And that's why even Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said, don't get involved in the abortion fight, because it's something that can lead to having you to actually violate Jewish law by being too strict. So I don't know what the circumstances are in this case, so I couldn't really give an opinion about what is going on. And of course, if she's already made up her mind, she's going to do what she wants anyway. So if I listen to the case, I see that she really should put up bait for adoption. It wouldn't hurt her too much. I've known many women who are pregnant who go to school. They're married, most of them. They go to school. I think President Rice knows a lot of those people in school too. And in fact, I think my wife even went to school when she was pregnant. So, I mean, there's nothing thing about going to school. And so she has a baby, and so she goes out for adoption. As Rabbi Walter said. But I don't know all the circumstances, so I couldn't give a definitive answer.
I married my wife when she finished her freshman year at Ohio State University. We had our first child at the end of her junior year. We had our second child when she was beginning graduate school. This was in the University of Oregon when we lived in Oregon. But she was married to me in that situation. It was a totally different situation. I think this story over here is unrealistic in regard to one thing. This young woman has already made up her mind. Let me read what you wrote. Susan does not want to have the baby. She said it over here. How many times are we? I know I have a hearing aid, but I mean, you could hear it. She's telling you this. She does not want to have the baby. And being a single mother will make that dream very difficult. Now it is to the second power. Then it says over here, she intends to have an abortion as quickly as possible. That's tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's to the third power over here. You're being very unrealistic that she will listen to you. I must tell you a story, a very brief story. When I was here, I came to Houston in 1965. In 1966, I had a call, and the caller said, my secretary said, it's a call from the Florence Crittenden home. I don't know if any of you know, I don't know if it exists anymore in Houston. Florence Crittenden home. She said, it's downtown. I thought it was a sorority from the University of Houston. I didn't know what it was. So I asked the young woman there, she was very young. I said, where are you from? She said, North Carolina. I just graduated from the University of North Carolina. I have to see you, Rabbi. I said, fine, why don't you come down tomorrow afternoon? She says, I can't come down. Can you come down to see me? It was downtown. I said, sure, I'll come down to see you. So I went down to see her, and I looked for Florence Crittenden home, according to the address that she gave me, and I saw it, and I walked inside, and I saw a strange thing. They were all young women over there. That's why I was correct. I thought it was some form of sorority. But it was strange. every last girl over there was pregnant. There was no two ways about it. I did not know that Florence Crittenham home was the home for unwed mothers. I didn't know this. Well, eventually she talked to me about this, and she said to me that she's from North Carolina, and her parents told her that we're sending you out of town because this will be a terrible embarrassment. Your father is the president of the synagogue, your mother is the president of the sisterhood, and you are going to be the one going to have a baby. We're telling everybody that you've graduated from college. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a year's tour of Europe. This is what you're going to do. And what you'll do is you'll give the baby up for adoption. This is what you are going to do. And remember, I said, what can I do for you over here? He says, Rabbi, it's September time. It's Rosh Hashanah time. I called your synagogue and I told them I'm Jewish. I want to go to shul on Rosh Hashanah. And you know what they told me? You've got to be a member of the congregation. This is what you have to do. So I said, I can't afford to be over here. Come downtown, come to the shul, and we'll make some agreement with you. I don't have a car to go. Can you send somebody here? No, we can't. Either you come down or not. So I remember said, don't worry. I will take care of you. So what I did is I went down, and I remember this was 1966. I said, I need a ticket for somebody. They said, who is this person? Very sick, I said. Let the person come in. We'll make arrangements. There won't be a very high fee that she has to pay. I said, give it to me over here. And they refused to give it to me. I have it in the story in one of my books, in my first book. And what eventually happened, I waited until this man, I saw where he took all the tickets. He was the head of the ticket. He put it in the drawer. And what he did is he locked the drawer. The drawer was locked. How am I going to get it? I must admit this. I broke the lock on the drawer that night, and I took a ticket, and I gave it to her the next day. This is what I did. And I went and I gave her the ticket. A week later, she calls me, says, Rabbi, come down. And I went down, and what happened? She says, I'm giving you back the ticket. I said, after breaking the lock and everything, a felony, you're going to give me back the ticket? She says, yes, I have to give it back. I said, why? She said, because my aunt in our little town in North Carolina has a heart problem, and her cardiologist suggested that she go to Dr. DeBakey in Houston, Texas. And where is she going to do? She's a very wealthy woman. She's going to go to the biggest synagogue, the Beth Yeshurun congregation, and she'll see me. I'm supposed to be in Paris, France, and she'll see me 9 months pregnant over here. Can you imagine what that's going to happen in our town over here? Well, I took about, what am I going to do? Eventually, I get a call again. You'll have to excuse me telling this story. Eventually, I get a call. She says, Rabbi, I just went into labor. I said, well, I hope it'll be a child, what you would like, a boy or a girl, whatever. He says, no, I have nobody in town. Can you come down and hold my hand as I'm downtown? So I told my wife, I said, Toby, you'll never believe this. She wants me at St. Joseph's Hospital. I said, Toby says, go down there. Now, I have 4 children. I never held my wife's hand in labor. And the reason for this was, first of all, those were different days. My wife had 4 cesareans, so I never had to hold a hand. The doctor just took her in. Perry Klein took her in. They had the baby, and that's just about all. I came back 35 minutes later. And I remember St. Joseph's Hospital is a Catholic hospital. And the nuns there wore their habits, their vestments. And I remember after the baby I sat 6 hours. I sat with her, holding her hands. And my wife said, I can't believe it. I can't get you for 60 minutes for anything. And she has you for 6 hours holding your hand in labor, listening to her kvetch and who knows what it is. And the outcome was she had the baby. So I was sitting, they put me in the father's room. So as I was sitting in the father's room, the nurse, she was about 4'10", that's just about all, wearing the Catholic habit, which they did at those days. She was the nurse. And she comes in and says, where is the father of so-and-so's child. So I got up, I said, I'm not the father, I'm merely a good friend, I'm the rabbi, I'm a clergyman. She says, we have a lot of priests like that also. Don't worry over here. I said, I swear to God, she said, don't blaspheme the name of God. 2 wrongs don't make 1 right over here. I'll never forget, whenever I'd go back to St. Joseph's Hospital, I always had a problem like that. I don't want to go into the rest of the story, but I just thought it would be an interesting one.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, let's see. Dr. Boniuk, you want to take a crack real quickly?
My father-in-law was an obstetrician, and he saw the days when abortion was not possible. It was a criminal action. And that obviously was wrong. And then he saw the progression to the days when abortion became possible. He lived in Canada, where the laws were a little bit different. And I think at the end of his life, he got to the point where he felt that although abortion is permissible, certainly, as the rabbis have said, is permissible in Jewish law, if the life of the mother is threatened or psychologically she's quite distressed by the pregnancy. So abortion is allowed by Jewish law. It's allowed by the law of the land. But I think he felt in his last years of life that abortion was being done almost at times as a whim. And look, my wife and I chat about this all the time. She believes, and I think she's indeed right, this is a decision that shouldn't be made by the government, should be made by individual women who have the right to make decisions about their body. But I think the decision sometimes can be a very difficult decision. Life is sacred. Recently I read a novel written by a minister, and he taught me something about abortion that I didn't know. Now, you would obviously expect that if a woman has an abortion, there can be significant psychological effects that take place early on and sometimes many, many years later. All kinds of possibilities. Not able to have children, feeling terribly about what they did. But an aspect that I'd never considered was the psychological effects on the man. And apparently there have been studies that show that something like 50% of the fathers of babies that are aborted undergo significant, almost like post-traumatic stress syndrome as a result of having the child that they are the father of being aborted. So, you know, I think in this case, if you read the statement clearly, she's made her decision. If you could not talk her into having the baby and putting it up for adoption or something of that sort, then I think even by Jewish law, under the criteria we talked about, where the life of the mother or her psychological well-being is in stress, I certainly think that abortion could be done. And but that aspect of it, the degree that which abortion is being done at times is almost in such a whimsical fashion that we need to give the life of the unborn baby a little bit more weight.
Jan told me he's going to take a pass on this one. I'm going to start with him on the next one. I will say, by the way, I had not, Rabbi Radinsky, heard the notion that the mother's psychological welfare could suddenly be a criteria. That, of course, opens a huge can of worms from both a halakhic and legal perspective. How are you defining psychological welfare? And, of course, every parent in the room knows that as soon as you have kids, you become nuts anyway. So that just seems to be but I'm curious, and I'd like to sort of learn more from you about that. Let's do one about Israel, but we are not going to do sort of what you might imagine. That is to say, we're...
Can I just say,
yeah, please.
I'm not feeling well, so if you'll excuse me.
Oh, we're not hearing his mic.
But I mean, I don't want to ruin didn't work, the mic didn't work, what happened? Anyway, I speak very loud anyway. But I'm not feeling well today, and I was promised that we would end by by now, and I have to go home. So
I understand.
if you can continue without me, I'm sure you don't really need my input.
please
then.
feel-
Do you want to, you sure?
What?
We're only going to do one more if you want to stay, but if you want to leave, I understand.
But I mean, everybody's going to have to talk. We're
No
talking about
problem.
15 minutes.
No problem. No problem. Thank you for being here.
I
Thank
just
you,
can't.
Frederick.
I want to show you this beat Johnny Walker.
Diminished by his loss for sure, but thank you, Rabbi Radinsky, for being here. Last question relates to Israel, but we are going to steer clear of the Palestinian conflict and stick with intra-Jewish conflict. Here is the hypothetical. Assume that in the next elections in Israel, the Haredi, or ultra-Orthodox parties, win an unusually large percentage of seats in the Knesset, or parliament, and therefore have unusually strong bargaining power. In their negotiations to be part of the coalition government, the Haredim re-raise the issue of who is a Jew and demand that the law of return apply only to persons who have either a Jewish mother or have been converted by an Orthodox rabbi, all of which is quite possible. Also assume that they prevail in their negotiations, which is also quite possible. What, if anything, would you do as an American Jew in response? And we'll start with you, Jan.
Yeah, it's funny because one thing that isn't often mentioned, you often hear that, well, the only Jewish state in the world is Israel. And that's not true, actually. There's actually the Jewish Republic in Siberia, which still exists, as I understand. It was created by Joseph Stalin. And the official language was Yiddish. The notion behind it, some say he had planned to send all the Jews there and didn't have time. He unfortunately, well, he died, and I guess he did fortunately die for that regard. But it's fascinating because his whole concept was to have a secular Jewish state where the language was Yiddish as opposed to Hebrew. And even though they were all communists, you could still have this secular notion of what was a Jew. It's a question that I've asked myself quite a bit. My background, aside from having both of my parents as Soviet Jews, meaning that they grew up with their parents withholding a lot of information about their background, not telling them about their Jewish roots, and a lot of it was to protect them from the rest of society. Now, on my father's side of the family, I come from a group of Jews. We're from in the Caucasus Mountains, in a town called Nalchik, and our group, known as Gorsky Evrei, translates to mountain Jews, which is not a type of goat, though we do like to eat goat. It's a small sect of Jews that lived in the mountain, and the question of where those Jews come from has always been interesting, and I think it's controversial in a sense, because there was an empire known as the Khazari Empire around that region that at one point converted to Judaism. It was out, there's a famous Jewish book, the Kuzari, written by a Spanish guy. I don't know what his name was, but it's a good book. And a lot of my family really, really disregards this notion because heaven forbid that our lineage couldn't be traced directly back to one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and that the mountain Jews, whose dances are different, whose language is completely different from Yiddish, not Hebrew, and whose background does seem to be, not European Jews certainly, but maybe even stem from a conversion process. Heaven forbid, I think, is what a lot of the mountain Jews would say. So the question of what is a Jew is really important, as we all know, and it's never quite so easy. In fact, there's a story that my father often tells. During World War II, the mountain Jews, or my town of Nalchik, was occupied by the Nazis, and all the European Jews were rounded up and sent to the camps. And the mountain Jews were approached, and they were told to show up and do the same. But one man, whose name was Makar Shabai, and he managed to convince the Nazis that since their dances were different, their languages were different, their skin looked different, Their practices were all completely different. They weren't Jews at all. And it was enough for the Nazis to postpone sending those Jews to the concentration camps, and it saved that entire community. And in fact, as soon as the Nazis left, the Soviets put this man in jail and said he was a conspirator and sentenced him to death. My great-grandmother happened to be a judge at the time, and she fought to make sure that this man was kept out of jail, and he eventually was freed, and there were no problems. But it's a story that I've always thought about, because it just goes to show that the question of who is a Jew changes, and it's not ever so black and white. I think it would be a real shame if we all lived by the traditional notion of who is a Jew. Again, it seems like the matrilineal determinant is one that I think was important at one point, because, well, that was the only way that you can determine where that individual came from. But now, for example, if you have two dads, or I think there are other ways of knowing what your lineage is, and if lineage is the only important determinant of Judaism, then I think we have a problem there as well. So it would be a real shame, I think, if the Haredi made that decision, and I think that I would hope that we all collectively would denounce that idea and say that there obviously are gray lines.
Well, first of all, reading the question, I have a daughter living in Israel. They're modern Orthodox. And I can tell you, knowing what I know about the political situation in Israel, the current situation, I really don't think it's possible. My daughter lives in Beit Shemesh. You all know about the 10 or 12 families that created a ruckus recently by claiming that some of the modern Orthodox kids that were walking in the area were not dressed appropriately, and they were denounced by the rest of the religious sects around the area. They've been denounced by the secular people who live in the area, and sometimes it's a very small amount. I really do not think that the Haredi are going to have an increased weight in the decisions that are made. But there are problems in the decisions that are made relative to conversion, who is a Jew, what conversions are done, and those need to be, those processes need to be improved. Now, interestingly, one of the things that I think will be a big help is recently the Supreme Court in Israel passed a ruling as unconstitutional that yeshiva students cannot be deferred from military service. I think that's an important aspect of what's going on in Israel. When Ben-Gurion established that ruling, there were a very small number of students. Now there are hundreds of thousands of them. They're happy to take what the state can provide them in terms of benefits and funding, but they need to serve in the Army like everybody else does. My grandkids, I've had two that have served in the Army, a boy and a girl. They're religious. They're happy to serve. I know religious people, some of whom even would be considered ultra-religious, who are serving currently in the Army. And I think this change in the law, which is due to take place this August, will help resolve some of that. Again, some of the weight that has been made and the efforts that have been made to make conversions, etc., difficult, that obviously needs to be changed, and it will change. And I don't think that the Haredi influence will become greater. I think it's going to become less.
Roy, you want to end or you want to go now? Go ahead.
I'm going to be very brief about this. I know people are leaving, so let's be short about this. First of all, let me just say that while this particular problem, as stated, is not new to the Reform movement, for example, Reform rabbis, and I believe in conservative rabbis, are not recognized as rabbis in the state of Israel and have no authority. The way in which the Reform movement has objected to the way in which the ultra-religious and the religious parties have influenced the state of Israel in ways that impact us is that we have supported organizations in Israel that fight for the rights of all Jews. including, by the way, rights of non-Jews, which is a different kind of problem, a different set of issues. Just as we have a Commission for Social Action here in the United States, sponsored by the Reform Movement, there's one in Israel. The one thing I would not do, I want to be clear about this, the one thing I would certainly not do is tell members of my congregation, don't support Israel because of what's going on. If this were to happen, I think to sit here and say, well, that won't happen. The question is, well, what would we do if that kind of thing were to happen? The one thing I would not do is tell Jewish people to withdraw their support, financial or otherwise, from the State of Israel. I would suggest that we find other avenues to support Israel as we fight for the rights of all people, including the issue that's here, so that all Jews have the opportunity to be recognized.
Rabbi Walter said what he would not do. You weren't specific what you would do. I'll tell you what I would do. I'd probably have nightmares. This is what I would probably have. But I think this is, as Dr. Boniuk, you said, it's a hypothetical question which really does not have merit this very moment. Take the statistics. You have 10% of the population that are Haredim right now. I know they're having 8 children, 9 children, 10 children, but work out the mathematics. My second degree was in math. Work it out, and you'll see that it'll take a long, long time. It'll be past my time, so I'm going to leave it up to you, Stuart, to make that decision over here, what's going to happen. You're absolutely correct. Who is a Jew? We do have problems. The Reform and the Conservative have problems. And we depend on, I hope people like Rabbi Radinsky will try to convince the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel that they should stop this, that unity for the Jewish people is far more important. It's like that story I told you. You cannot break all 4 of those sticks at one time. If you're united, you stand and you're powerful. If you're divided, you fall apart. Everybody will beat you. There's no 2 ways about that. I also say, the question that you asked over here was, what, if anything, would you do in response over here? That means, what would you do, Rabbi Segal? As I told you, I'd have nightmares, but I never tell the Israelis what to do. As long as I am not living in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Petach Tikva or Bet Shemesh, I have no right to tell them what they have to do and what they must do. I don't like if somebody in Jerusalem will tell me what I in Houston have to do over here. I once said from the pulpit, and I remember I got a lot of flack from this, I said I never told anybody from the pulpit that they should make aliyah to Israel, that it's a mitzvah, and go move to Israel. And I told them the reason I didn't do this, and I don't do this, is because of a simple reason. When I take my wife and we move to Israel, then I'll say move with me. But as long as I'm staying right near my land and staying in Houston, I ain't telling anybody, you move to Israel where it's difficult and your kids are going to serve in the military, your sons and your daughters, and my kids will be going to the University of Texas and belonging to the fraternities and the sororities. I don't think that I have that right really to do that. Now, if you would ask me, what do you think will be happening then? I hope, God forbid, there will not be a revolution in Israel. That's one thing. It could be. I hope also that there will not be a mass movement of people to the United States away from Israel. I also hope that there wouldn't be a new desire, let's go to Uganda. Well, you know, so many years ago, they wanted to go to Uganda, and we'll go to Uganda. I hope not. But my hopes and my prayers are that this is merely a hypothetical question, which it's something that I'll have nightmares, I'm telling you about. I hope this thing will never really come to fruition. Thank you.
Let me, before thanking the panel, suggest both to Rabbi Segal and Dr. Boniuk, of course, it is a hypothetical, just that. I don't think it is as far-fetched as both you imagine, even running your statistical numbers. Go Google the Beit Shemesh episode, and you'll be disturbed, quite candidly. And the issue does come up. The Haredi parties bring the issue up every year, and increasingly they're getting their way with respect to funding yeshivot and all sorts of other things. So like you, with a brother who lives there, believe me, but there are right now in Israel are buses, public buses, where the women are forced to sit in the back. So it is not an outrageous hypothetical. Nevertheless, it's a hypothetical. In any case, I want to say this about the speakers were phenomenal. They were obviously all so thoughtful. If you can't tell from where you were, they obviously have done a whole lot of thinking in advance. Some of them have come with notes prepared. So thank you to Rabbi Walter, Rabbi Segal, to obviously Rabbi Radinsky, Dr. Boniuk, and Jan Digilov, who I thought were phenomenal. Thank you for your time.
This program is protected by copyright and may not be redistributed in whole or in part without the express written consent of Rice University Digital Media Services.